Joining me now are Danya Perry, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and now a senior writer for Politico magazine. Thank you both for being here tonight. Clarence Thomas being cited directly in all of that. It's very clear that Trump's lawyers enjoyed his direction, or at least paid attention to it. I want to talk a little bit about what unfolded in the courtroom today, Danya. Judge Chutkan seemed incredibly resistant to the argument Trump's lawyers were making that, like, handling this business before the election would be bad news. She says, quote, "This court is not concerned with the electoral schedule." Trump's lawyer, "We're talking about the presidency of the United States, and we're entitled..." Judge Chutkan, "I'm not talking about the presidency of the United States. I'm talking about a 4-count criminal indictment." Bam. What'd you think of that?
Bam. She is resetting and making clear to, of course, the parties in the case and to the public that this case is just like any other case, and it will proceed according to the schedule that any other defendant would be entitled to or subject to. So that, and she repeatedly said that. She made very clear, I think John Lauro, the defense counsel, at some point said that we shouldn't rush to judgment here, and from reporting from the court, she kind of chuckled to that and said, no, this has been
we're not rushing into anything.
No, this has been over a year, and it's been tied up in litigation and in the superior courts. So I think she just made clear that we're going to do things the way we ordinarily do and not give special dispensations, despite the not direction, but I guess invitation of Justice Clarence Thomas. And so she set a pretty tight schedule after the proceedings were over. And as much as she said she's not driven by the election and the case is not driven by the electoral calendar, the briefing on the immunity issue will be completed before the election.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it would be for any case. It's a happenstance of the calendar, not of the campaign or the election.
Let's look at the calendar for a second. Ankush, the immunity arguments, the calendar there is September 10th, turn over all required evidence. September 26th, which, if you're following along at home, that is a day to mark on your calendar. That's the deadline for the special counsel to submit their opening brief. October 17th is when Trump's team can respond to the special counsel's filing, and October 29th is the deadline for the special counsel to file its reply. I need not remind us all, maybe I do, Election Day is November 5th, right? October 29th is the conclusion of what we expect to be a sort of intense back and forth between these two teams. How much do you think we're going to see publicly of the information that's presented, Ankush?
Well, look, that is the big question, and you're exactly right to instruct people to circle the date on their calendar. I literally did that on my phone this afternoon.
Did you circle it on your phone? I'm sorry.
I did not.
Go ahead.
Digitally. So excuse me, not literally, figuratively. But the government said it's prepared to submit a large body of evidence to the court, including information concerning pled and unpled facts, meaning facts that are not alleged in the indictment. And that submission could come in the form of things like grand jury transcripts, interview summaries, documents from the discovery. They made very clear that they intend for it to be a robust presentation. The big caveat is whether or not the government decides or believes that it is appropriate to put some or even most of that information in under seal, which is something that the government, in fact, alluded to today. Now, that process could itself get messy. I imagine media organizations would fight that effort. Judge Chutkan may not go along with it, but she may very well agree. Now, ordinarily, material is not supposed to be kept out of public dockets in public court proceedings, except in pretty narrow circumstances, things like classified information, issues that might implicate potential harm to witnesses, or prejudice to an ongoing investigation. But, it's pretty clear to me from just reading the transcript of this afternoon that the government is actually treading kind of lightly here, and even though not explicitly, is at least implicitly trying to be a little cautious heading into Election Day. So I'm hopeful we'll see a lot of new information, but we really won't know until we get closer and potentially on September 26th itself.
Do you read anything into Chutkan's sort of refusal to concede to the political realities of the day as a sign that she might sort of charge forward and say, there are no exceptions, there are rare exceptions exceptions to keeping this under seal, so I'm going to make this information public. Do you think?
I do.
You do?
I think at every turn she has signaled that she is not giving special dispensations to this particular criminal defendant. And so if she deems after she receives the briefings that it is necessary or important for this information to be made public, and that's assuming, as Ankush said, I mean, that the government even tries to seal it, it ultimately is her decision. She will decide whether it should or should not be sealed, and then whether she's going to have an evidentiary hearing. So it's fully within her discretion. And yeah, I think she'll do what she ordinarily would do, even though it's just days before the election.
Days before the election. And then there's the other piece of this, Ankush, which is whether or not Clarence Thomas, special counsel Jack Smith, should be taken off of this case entirely because he was unconstitutionally appointed, which is sort of the direction of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to the Trump legal team, as the legal team would have it. The calendar for, sort of resolving that dispute, October 24th, Trump's team submits its motion to dismiss the case. Halloween, the special counsel replies, and November 7th, which is 2 days after the election, Lord knows what's going to be happening on that front, is the deadline for Trump's team to reply. Judge Chutkan did not seem to favor the notion that special counsel Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. She, I think, said that she did not find Judge Cannon's call on this topic in Mar-a-Lago not particularly persuasive. Is it unusual to have a judge v. judge situation playing out in public view?
Playing out at this sort of high level, yes. It's not that unusual for district court judges to disagree on some issues. In this particular issue, it's unusual because Eileen Cannon's decision was a real outlier. And as Judge Chutkan pointed out during the hearing today, there is controlling D.C. Circuit court opinion on this point that binds her. So even if she wanted to agree with Eileen Cannon and she said it was unpersuasive, as you noted, she couldn't because she's bound by the D.C. Circuit's ruling. Now, that is not to say that that argument will eventually not carry the day after we go through some years-long process. Justice Thomas seems inclined to agree with that argument, but for now, I don't expect Judge Chutkan to give it much credence.
Ankush summoned the specter of Clarence Thomas, so I have to ask. Judge Chutkan seems remarkably resigned to the appellate process here, that any decision she makes is going to be appealed. That's how Trump does it. Is this all destined to land in the lap of the Supreme Court?
Yeah, it will. It's a question of how long, and once the election is over, I mean, I guess that's the only if, right? If Trump should win a second term, then all bets are off, and perhaps the whole case will be dismissed, and then in that event, it likely won't be appealed. But I think Judge Chutkan very squarely sees the issue for what it is and has already said, look, she's not setting a trial date now because she understands that it will go up the circuit again to the Supreme Court. And so what's the point of putting a date certain?
Right, there's no trial date because she's like...
Ankush doesn't have to circle that in his calendar.
It's just, he literally said the word years until potentially this trial begins. It really feels like it's a face-off, the beginning of a face-off between a district court judge, Judge Chutkan, and the conservative bent of the Supreme Court, and we'll see what happens there. Danya Perry and Ankush Kardori, thank you guys for making the time and giving us the scoop.